Commander Zethkai stood before the great assembly hall of the Galactic Council. His four muscular arms hung at his sides as hundreds of alien eyes watched him from the curved seats above. The massive chamber echoed with the whispers of 47 different species, all waiting to hear his testimony. He had traveled across 3 star systems to be here, carrying a message that would change how the galaxy viewed one particular species forever. The Vorthak warrior took a deep breath through his twin nostrils. His natural armor plates shifted slightly as he prepared to speak. For 300 cycles, his people had been the apex predators of known space. They conquered worlds like others collected trinkets. 17 star systems had fallen before. Their might, and not one had offered resistance worth remembering. Zethkai remembered the day everything changed. It was exactly 3 solar years ago when his fleet detected the strange transmissions coming from a small blue planet in an unremarkable system. The signals were weak and primitive, filled with what seemed to be entertainment broadcasts and basic communication attempts. His science officers had laughed at the simple mathematics and crude technology displays they intercepted. War Prime Thekmor had been in command of the Conquest fleet that day. The massive Vorthak leader stood nearly 3 meters tall, his battle scars telling stories of a dozen successful invasions. When the reports about the blue planet reached his command chamber, Thekmor had dismissed the inhabitants with a wave of his primary arm. "Soft pink creatures," Thekmor had growled, his voice carrying the authority of unchallenged victory. "Look at their pathetic kinetic weapons. They still use chemical propulsion for their primitive spacecraft. This will not even qualify as a proper conquest." The other commanders had agreed. Fleet Captain Nexivor had pointed out that the beings called humans showed no signs of energy weapons or particle shields. Combat Master Drekhun had noted their fragile-looking bodies and their apparent need for a very specific atmospheric mixture, just to survive. The consensus was clear. This would be what the Vorthak called a harvesting operation, rather than a true military campaign. Zethkai had been chosen to lead the subjugation force precisely because the mission was considered so trivial. As a rising commander with only 2 successful planetary conquests to his name, he needed easy victories to advance his rank. The human homeworld seemed perfect for this purpose. A simple demonstration of Vorthak superiority, a few orbital bombardments of their major population centers, and the survivors would surrender within days. The preparation had been minimal. Instead of the usual invasion fleet of 50 vessels, Thekmor allocated only 12 ships to the operation. 6 battle cruisers, 4 troop transports, and 2 support vessels. Even this small force seemed excessive for dealing with a species that had not yet achieved faster-than-light travel. Zethkai spent weeks studying the intercepted human transmissions. Their military broadcasts showed soldiers carrying individual kinetic weapons and riding in primitive ground vehicles. Their cities had no visible energy barriers or defensive systems. Most telling of all, their entertainment media was filled with stories about surrender and negotiation when faced with superior forces. The intelligence reports painted humans as a typical prey species. They lived in large groups for protection, avoided direct confrontation, and seemed to value individual survival above all else. Their governments appeared to change frequently through nonviolent means, suggesting they would quickly submit to new authority rather than fight hopeless battles. On the day of departure, Zethkai stood on the bridge of his flagship and gazed at the fleet assembled around him. Even this small force represented more firepower than most civilizations could muster for their entire defense. His ship alone carried enough plasma cannons to level a human city in minutes. The troop transports held thousands of Vorthak warriors, each one capable of defeating dozens of the weak humans in personal combat. Thekmor transmitted his final orders with obvious boredom. "Complete the subjugation quickly, Commander. The Council expects us to begin mining operations within 1 full cycle. Do not waste time with extended negotiations. Make an example of their military forces, and the rest will surrender. As the fleet entered hyperspace toward the human system, Zethkai felt the familiar excitement of approaching victory. He imagined returning to the home worlds with stories of another effortless conquest. Perhaps the humans would provide some useful laborers for the mining operations, assuming any survived the initial demonstrations of Vorthak power. The journey took 18 standard days. During this time, Zethkai continued monitoring human communications, looking for signs that they had detected the approaching fleet. The transmissions showed no change in pattern or content. Their military forces remained in normal peacetime positions. Their civilian populations continued their daily routines without any sign of preparation for invasion. This lack of awareness struck Zethkai as further proof of human primitiveness. Any civilization with proper sensor technology would have detected approaching ships days before arrival. The humans seemed completely oblivious to their impending conquest, living their simple lives without any understanding of the vast universe around them. When the fleet finally arrived at the edge of the human solar system, Zethkai ordered the standard intimidation display. His ships formed attack formations and began broadcasting surrender demands in the major human languages. The messages were simple and direct: submit immediately or face complete destruction. The response from Earth surprised him only in its speed. Instead of the usual hours or days of panicked negotiation attempts, the humans replied within minutes. A single transmission came from their largest military installation, brief and incomprehensible. Unknown vessels, you are ordered to withdraw from Earth space immediately. Any hostile action will be met with appropriate response. Zethkai had stared at the message display, wondering if the translation systems had malfunctioned. The humans were actually refusing to surrender. Even more bizarre, they seemed to be threatening him. He checked the tactical displays again, confirming that the human forces consisted entirely of primitive kinetic weapons and chemical fuel spacecraft. Yet somehow, they believed they could offer appropriate response to a Vorthak battle fleet. Fleet Captain Nexavor suggested that the humans simply did not understand the situation. Perhaps their primitive minds could not grasp the technological gap between their civilizations. Zethkai decided to provide a demonstration that would clarify matters quickly. Standing now before the Galactic Council, Zethkai paused in his testimony. The assembled delegates leaned forward, sensing that his story was about to take an unexpected turn. He looked up at the viewing gallery where several human representatives sat quietly, their faces showing no emotion, as they waited for him to continue. Zethkai continued his testimony before the silent council chamber. The memory of those first days above Earth remained burned into his consciousness like a brand. He had expected a simple demonstration of power followed by immediate surrender. What he got instead was his first lesson in human nature. The orbital bombardment began at dawn over the human continent they called North America. Zethkai had selected 3 military installations for destruction, choosing targets that would showcase Vorthak firepower without causing unnecessary civilian casualties. This was standard procedure for breaking the will of a new species. Show them their defenses are useless, then offer terms. The first plasma beam struck a facility the humans called Peterson Air Force Base. The energy blast vaporized buildings and equipment in a sphere of superheated destruction visible from orbit. Zethkai watched the tactical display, waiting for panic transmissions from human command centers. Instead, within minutes of the attack, new signals began broadcasting from hidden locations. All units, this is Cheyenne Mountain. We are now at DEFCON 1. Execute Plan Bravo immediately. Repeat. Execute Plan Bravo. The voice belonged to General Frank Hayes, though Zethkai would not learn his name until much later. What surprised the Vorthak commander was the calm tone of the transmission. There was no fear, no begging for mercy, no attempts at negotiation. The humans were responding to devastating attack with military efficiency. The second target was a naval base on an island the humans called Pearl Harbor. The plasma bombardment turned ships and aircraft into molten metal, sending columns of smoke high into the atmosphere. Again, Zethkai expected surrender signals. Instead, the human military communications increased in frequency and organization. Captain Jake Morrison's voice cut through the static from somewhere in the continental interior. All remaining air assets, implement dispersal pattern Delta. Ground forces, initiate underground protocols. This is not a drill. Zethkai ordered his communications officer to translate the human military codes, but the messages were encrypted beyond easy decryption. More troubling was the tone of organization. In the transmissions, these humans were not collapsing into chaos as expected. They were following prepared plans. The third demonstration target was a facility called Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. As the plasma beam carved through aircraft hangars and research buildings, Zethkai noticed something that made his secondary hearts skip a beat. The human military assets were moving. Vehicles, aircraft, and personnel were relocating to new positions even as the bombardment continued. They had been ready for this. Combat Master Drek Hoon reported from the tactical station, with confusion in his voice. "Commander, the human forces are not responding according to standard prey patterns. They appear to have anticipated orbital bombardment and prepared countermeasures." This was impossible. The humans had shown no signs of awareness regarding the approaching fleet. Their sensor technology was too primitive to detect ships at long range. Yet somehow, they had been prepared for exactly this type of attack. Zethkai decided to begin ground operations immediately. Perhaps seeing Vorthak warriors in person would break whatever strange resolve the humans were displaying. He ordered the first wave of drop pods to launch toward major population centers. The pods descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars, their heat shields glowing as they cut through the air. Each pod contained 20 Vorthak warriors in full battle armor armed with plasma rifles and energy shields. The landing sites had been chosen for maximum psychological impact, city centers where large numbers of humans could witness Vorthak superiority. The first pod landed in the center of a city called Denver. As the pod doors opened and the warriors emerged, they expected to see crowds of terrified humans fleeing in panic. Instead, they found empty streets and an eerie silence. The humans had evacuated their civilian population. Sergeant Amy Collins was waiting for them. The human soldier had positioned herself on top of a building overlooking the landing site. She carried a primitive chemical explosive device that should have been incapable of penetrating Vorthak armor. As the warriors spread out to secure the area, she triggered a carefully planned demolition that brought down 3 surrounding buildings simultaneously. 7 Vorthak warriors died in the collapse, crushed under tons of concrete and steel. The survivors found themselves trapped in a debris field with limited visibility and compromised communications. This was when they learned that humans had been watching and learning from every orbital bombardment. Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez led a squad of human soldiers who emerged from underground tunnels that honeycombed the city. They used the rubble as cover and attacked with coordinated precision that stunned the Vorthak survivors. Instead of facing the warriors directly, the humans used hit-and-run tactics that exploited every weakness in Vorthak equipment and training. The Vorthak had trained for conquest battles against conventional military formations. They were experts at breaking organized resistance through superior firepower and individual combat prowess. But the humans were not fighting a conventional battle. They were fighting like prey animals that had suddenly become predators. Each human soldier seemed to know exactly where to strike Vorthak armor for maximum effect. They used their smaller size to move through spaces too narrow for Vorthak warriors. Most disturbing of all, they showed no fear of death. Human soldiers would sacrifice themselves without hesitation to destroy a single Vorthak warrior or piece of equipment. The pattern repeated across 12 landing sites. In every case, The humans had evacuated civilians and prepared tactical responses. That turned Vorthak advantages into disadvantages. In Chicago, human engineers had filled the subway tunnels with explosive traps. In Los Angeles, the military had prepared sniper positions that could target Vorthak warriors from impossible angles. But it was in New York City that Zethkai encountered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Dr. Lisa Park had remained in the city to coordinate field hospitals for treating wounded soldiers. When Vorthak forces overran her position, she had been captured along with several human medical personnel. According to all Vorthak intelligence, humans were selfish creatures who would abandon their wounded to save themselves. Dr. Park spent 3 days treating injured Vorthak warriors with the same care she gave to human patients. She worked without rest, using her medical knowledge to save the lives of beings who had come to conquer her world. When asked why she would help her enemies, her answer confused every Vorthak who heard it. Because they're hurt, and I'm a doctor. The concept made no sense to Zethkai. In Vorthak culture, enemies were destroyed or enslaved. The idea of providing aid to hostile forces violated everything he understood about warfare and survival. Yet this human female risked her own life repeatedly to save warriors who would kill her the moment they recovered. Even more disturbing was the effect Dr. Park had on the Vorthak wounded under her care. Several warriors reported strange feelings of guilt about the invasion. A few actually requested to be transferred away from her medical facility because they found her compassion unsettling. After 1 week of ground operations, Zethkai faced a situation no Vorthak commander had ever encountered. His forces were taking steady casualties against an enemy that should have been helpless. The humans were learning and adapting to Vorthak tactics faster than seemed possible. Worse, they were doing things that violated every assumption about how intelligent species behaved under extreme stress. The breaking point came during the Battle of Fort Knox. Captain Jake Morrison had assembled a mixed force of regular military and civilian volunteers to defend a facility the humans considered strategically important. When Zethkai's warriors attacked in overwhelming numbers, Morrison led a defense that should have collapsed within hours. Instead, the humans fought for 3 days. They used every scrap of cover, every piece of debris, every advantage the terrain could provide. When their ammunition ran low, they switched to improvised weapons. When their positions were overrun, they fell back to new defensive lines that had been prepared in advance. When individual soldiers were mortally wounded, they used their final moments to inflict maximum damage on Vorthak forces. Captain Morrison himself was cornered in the command bunker with only 5 other humans. Zethkai had offered terms of surrender, promising medical treatment and prisoner status. Morrison's response echoed through Zethkai's memory as he stood before the Galactic Council. "We didn't ask you to come here. We won't ask you to leave. We'll make you leave." The humans in that bunker fought until their weapons were empty, then fought with improvised tools, then fought with their bare hands. They died one by one, never surrendering, never begging, never showing anything but determination to resist. Conquest. Zethkai ordered his communications officer to contact War Prime Thekmor and request immediate reinforcements. For the first time in his military career, he had to admit that a simple harvesting operation was beyond his current capabilities. Zethkai's voice grew quieter as he reached the most difficult part of his testimony. The assembled delegates of the Galactic Council leaned forward, sensing that the Vorthak commander was approaching something that had fundamentally changed him. He paused for a moment, his 4 arms trembling slightly as ancient warrior instincts warred with newer understanding. The reinforcements arrived 6 months after his initial request. War Prime Thekmor had been furious at the delay in conquest, though he tried to hide his concern behind anger. 20 additional warships dropped out of hyperspace above Earth, bringing the total Vorthak force to 32 vessels. It was more firepower than had ever been needed for a single-planet conquest. But the humans had not been idle during those 6 months. Engineer Paul Kim had been leading a team of human scientists in studying every piece of Vorthak technology. They could recover from the battlefield. When Zethkai's reinforcements arrived, they found human soldiers carrying modified Vorthak plasma rifles. Somehow, the humans had not only figured out how to operate alien weapons, but had actually improved their efficiency. The modified weapons used less energy per shot while generating more destructive force. Human engineers had also created portable versions of Vorthak energy shields, though they were crude compared to the originals. Most shocking of all, human aircraft had been fitted with salvaged Vorthak propulsion systems, giving them speed and maneuverability that rivaled Vorthak fighters. Thekmor's response was predictable. He ordered immediate escalation of orbital bombardment, targeting not just military installations, but also industrial centers and population areas. The War Prime believed that massive civilian casualties would finally break human resistance. He was wrong. The bombing of civilian targets had the opposite effect. Instead of surrendering, human resistance became more desperate and more effective. It was as if the humans drew strength from suffering, becoming more dangerous as their situation became more hopeless. Colonel Kate Thompson commanded the defense of Denver when Thekmor's expanded fleet targeted the city for complete destruction. The bombardment had been going on for 6 hours when Thompson made a decision that no Vorthak mind could comprehend. Rather than allow the city to fall to ground forces, she detonated a nuclear device in the city center. The explosion vaporized Thompson, her entire command staff, and 3,000 Vorthak warriors who had been advancing through the urban ruins. But it also sent a message that echoed across every human communication channel on the planet. The humans would destroy their own cities rather than allow them to be conquered. Zethkai had been monitoring human communications when Thompson made her final transmission. Her voice was calm and steady as she spoke to her superiors. Target is painted. Device is armed. Tell my daughter that Mommy loves her and that some things are worth dying for. The concept of willing self-destruction to deny victory to an enemy was alien to Vorthak thinking. In their culture, survival was the highest virtue. A warrior who chose death over surrender was considered mentally defective. But Thompson's sacrifice had strategic value that became clear within hours. Human forces across the planet began implementing similar tactics. When faced with overwhelming force, they would destroy infrastructure rather than allow it to be captured. Bridges, power plants, fuel depots, and communication centers were demolished by their own defenders. The humans were systematically destroying their own civilization to prevent the Vorthak from benefiting from conquest. Even more disturbing was the effect on human morale. Each act of sacrifice seemed to strengthen rather than weaken human resolve. Soldiers fought harder when they knew their cities had been destroyed. Civilians volunteered for dangerous missions when they learned their families had died in bombardments. It was during this period that Zethkai had his first direct encounter with Marine Corporal Steve Garcia. Garcia had been wounded during the defense of a supply depot outside Los Angeles. Vorthak warriors had surrounded his position and demanded surrender. The human had been shot through both legs and was bleeding heavily, clearly unable to continue fighting. In any rational scenario, he should have surrendered and received medical treatment. Instead, Garcia had used his remaining ammunition to destroy the supply depot's fuel tanks. The explosion killed 5 Vorthak warriors and denied the alien forces access to equipment they needed for their ground operations. Garcia died in the blast, but not before ensuring that his death served a strategic purpose. Zethkai found Garcia's body in the aftermath, clutching a photograph of a human female and a small human child. The image had been protected by Garcia's body during the explosion, and something about the dead Marine's expression haunted the Vorthak commander. Even in death, Garcia's face showed no fear, no regret, only grim satisfaction at having completed his mission. This was when Zethkai began to understand that the humans were fighting a different kind of war than any species he had encountered. They were not fighting to win in any conventional sense. They were fighting to make conquest so costly that the Vorthak would eventually abandon their efforts. Dr. Lisa Park's psychological warfare broadcasts began during the 7th month of the invasion. The human doctor had somehow gained access to Vorthak communication frequencies and was speaking directly to individual Vorthak soldiers. Her messages were not threats or demands for surrender. Instead, she calmly explained human motivations and asked probing questions about Vorthak psychology. "You came here expecting us to surrender when faced with superior force," her voice would say during quiet periods between battles. "But why did you assume that? Have you ever considered that some things might be more important than individual survival? Have you ever asked yourselves what would happen if your own worlds were invaded?" The broadcasts were having an unexpected effect on Vorthak morale. Warriors who had been confident in their superiority began questioning the purpose of the invasion. Some actually requested transfers away from Earth, claiming that the humans were contaminating their thoughts with weakness. Zethkai found himself listening to Dr. Park's broadcasts with growing fascination. She had somehow learned enough about Vorthak culture to target their psychological vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Her questions struck at assumptions that formed the foundation of Vorthak military thinking. "Your war prime tells you that conquest makes you strong," Dr. Park would say. "But what kind of strength comes from destroying those who cannot defend themselves? What honor is there in victory over a weaker opponent? Are you warriors, or are you simply bullies with advanced technology?" The turning point came during the 10th month of the invasion, when human forces launched their first major counteroffensive. Admiral Susan Blake coordinated a space battle that should have been impossible with human technology. Using modified Vorthak fighters and improvised tactics, human pilots destroyed 6 Vorthak cruisers and forced the remaining fleet to retreat to high orbit. The battle demonstrated that humans had not only adapted to Vorthak technology, but had learned to use it more effectively than its creators. Human pilots showed a creativity and willingness to take risks that Vorthak commanders could not match. They used their smaller ships like insects attacking giants, swarming and striking at vulnerable points with coordinated precision. Captain Jake Morrison had survived the siege of Fort Knox, and now led a combined ground force that began systematically retaking conquered territory. His tactics were unlike anything in Vorthak military doctrine. Instead of attempting to match Vorthak firepower, human forces used mobility and intelligence to attack supply lines and communication centers. Morrison's forces seemed to anticipate Vorthak movements before they happened. They struck at exactly the right time and place to cause maximum disruption with minimum risk. Most importantly, they coordinated their attacks with civilian resistance groups that had been organizing throughout the occupation. The humans had turned their entire population into a military asset. Children served as messengers and scouts. Elderly humans provided intelligence about Vorthak patrol patterns. Scientists developed new weapons and countermeasures. Even human artists and entertainers contributed by maintaining morale and spreading resistance propaganda. Zethkai realized that his forces were not fighting an army. They were fighting an entire civilization that had decided to resist conquest regardless of the cost. Every human was a potential combatant, every building a potential fortress, every piece of technology a potential weapon. The final blow to Vorthak morale came when human forces captured one of Thekmor's communication arrays and began broadcasting their own messages to the Vorthak fleet. Captain Morrison's voice reached every Vorthak warrior as he delivered a simple ultimatum. "You came here to conquer us. You have burned our cities and killed our people. You thought we would surrender because you were stronger. You were wrong. We would rather die as free humans than live as Vorthak slaves. Every day you remain here, more of your warriors will die. Every day you stay, We will learn more about your technology and your weaknesses. You cannot win this war because we will never stop fighting. Leave now, or we will make you leave." Standing before the Galactic Council, Zethkai closed his eyes as he remembered the moment he realized that Morrison was right. The Vorthak could destroy Earth, but they could never truly conquer it. The humans had made conquest impossible by refusing to accept defeat. Zethkai's testimony entered its final phase as he described the complete reversal of fortune that had shattered every assumption about human capabilities. The Galactic Council chamber had grown completely silent, with even the translator devices seeming to whisper as they carried his words to the assembled delegates. The coordinated human counteroffensive began in the 13th month of the invasion. Admiral Susan Blake had spent the previous month studying Vorthak fleet formations and communication protocols. When she finally struck, her attack demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that surprised even Zethkai's most experienced commanders. Blake's forces had been hiding in the outer asteroid belt, using modified Vorthak cloaking technology to mask their presence. Her fleet consisted entirely of captured and converted alien vessels, operated by human crews who had learned to use Vorthak systems more efficiently than their original designers. The attack came during a shift change in the orbital patrol schedule. Human intelligence had been monitoring Vorthak communications for months, learning the patterns and procedures that governed fleet operations. Blake struck at the exact moment when half the Vorthak ships were powered down for routine maintenance. Zethkai watched from his flagship as human fighters swarmed through the formation like angry insects. The human pilots used tactics no Vorthak commander had ever encountered. They ignored conventional engagement rules, attacking supply ships instead of combat vessels, targeting communication arrays instead of weapons systems. Within 4 hours, Blake's forces had destroyed the orbital platforms that served as bases for Vorthak ground operations. More importantly, they had captured 3 intact cruisers and their crews. The humans now had access to Vorthak military databases and communication codes. On the ground, Captain Jake Morrison led the liberation of occupied territories with a strategy that combined conventional military tactics with the guerrilla warfare humans had perfected during the occupation. His forces moved like water, flowing around strong Vorthak positions to strike at weak points in the rear. Morrison had learned to think like a Vorthak commander, anticipating their responses and preparing counters in advance. When Vorthak forces concentrated to defend important positions, human fighters would attack isolated outposts. When the aliens spread out to protect everything, Morrison would mass his forces for devastating strikes against key targets. But it was the San Francisco gambit that finally convinced Zethkai that the war was lost. General Frank Hayes had been planning the operation for 6 months, using the city as bait in a trap of unprecedented scale. Hayes allowed Vorthak forces to capture San Francisco without resistance, even going so far as to leave military equipment behind for the aliens to discover. The city appeared to be a major strategic prize, perfect for use as a base for controlling the western coast of North America. Thekmore had moved his entire reserve force to secure the city, bringing 27 ships into low orbit to support the ground occupation. For 2 weeks, it seemed like the Vorthak had finally achieved a significant victory. The city provided excellent facilities for military operations, and human resistance in the area appeared to have collapsed. Hayes had been counting on Vorthak overconfidence. On the appointed day, he triggered a sequence of events that had been planned down to the smallest detail. Every building in San Francisco had been rigged with explosives during the evacuation. Every fuel depot, ammunition dump, and supply cache contained hidden charges. Even the harbor had been mined with devices that would turn ships into weapons. When Hayes gave the signal, the entire city became a weapon. The explosion was visible from orbit as 27 Vorthak ships were caught in a chain reaction that consumed the metropolitan area. Electromagnetic pulses from specially designed devices disabled the alien vessels, sending them crashing into the bay or the surrounding mountains. In a single moment, Hayes had eliminated more than half of the remaining Vorthak fleet. Zethkai's own ship had been damaged in the blast, its engines crippled and communications array destroyed. As his vessel limped away from the destruction, he realized that the humans had sacrificed an entire city to achieve a strategic objective. The concept was so alien to Vorthak, thinking that none of his officers could process what they had witnessed. The retreat became a rout as human forces pressed their advantage across multiple fronts. Morrison's ground forces overran Vorthak positions that had been weakened by the orbital disaster. Blake's space forces hunted down damaged alien ships with ruthless efficiency. Most importantly, human psychological warfare specialists broadcast continuous messages describing the destruction of the Vorthak fleet. It was during this chaotic retreat that Zethkai's ship was finally disabled by human fighters. The attack had been precisely targeted to destroy weapons and engines while leaving life support intact. The humans wanted prisoners, not corpses. Zethkai found himself in the strange position of being a prisoner of war on a world his people had tried to conquer. The experience would prove to be the most educational period of his life. Dr. Lisa Park supervised his medical treatment personally, ensuring that his injuries were treated with the same care given to human casualties. The irony was not lost on Zethkai that the same female who had been broadcasting psychological warfare messages was now saving his life. Their first conversation took place in a field hospital outside the ruins of Sacramento. Zethkai had expected interrogation, torture, or execution. Instead, Dr. Park simply asked him questions about Vorthak culture and motivations. "Why did you come here?" she asked, her tone curious rather than accusatory. "What did you hope to gain by conquering Earth?" Zethkai found himself explaining concepts of Vorthak expansion and resource acquisition, but Dr. Park's follow-up questions revealed the underlying assumptions in ways he had never considered. She asked about Vorthak families, their hopes for the future, their fears about survival in a hostile galaxy. "Do you have children?" Dr. Park asked during one of their sessions. "What kind of galaxy do you want them to inherit?" The question struck at something fundamental in Zethkai's psychology. He did have offspring, young warriors who would someday face their own challenges in an expanding universe. For the first time, he found himself wondering what lessons his conquest of Earth would teach them about honor, strength, and the proper treatment of other intelligent species. Dr. Park showed him recordings of human families who had lost members during the invasion. Instead of hatred or demands for revenge, these humans spoke about forgiveness and the need to understand why the conflict had occurred. Their capacity for mercy toward those who had caused them suffering was unlike anything in Zethkai's experience. Captain Morrison visited the detention facility several times, not to interrogate prisoners, but to discuss post-war relationships between humans and Vorthak. His approach was that of a soldier talking to another soldier, sharing professional respect despite their former enemy status. "You fought well," Morrison told Zethkai during one visit. "Your warriors showed courage and skill, but you never understood what you were really fighting against. You thought you were conquering a planet. Actually, you were attacking an idea." Morrison explained that humans fought so fiercely not because they were naturally aggressive, but because they valued freedom more than life itself. The concept of independence was so fundamental to human psychology that they would destroy everything they had built rather than allow it to be controlled by others. "We didn't want to kill your people," Morrison said. "We just wanted you to leave us alone. When you refused to do that, we had to make the cost of staying higher than the value of conquest." Zethkai spent months in human custody, studying their society and trying to understand how they had defeated a technologically superior force. The answer lay not in any single factor, but in the combination of adaptability, cooperation, and sacrifice that seemed to define human nature. The humans treated their prisoners according to strict ethical guidelines, providing medical care, adequate food, and even recreational activities. Vorthak warriors who had expected brutal treatment found themselves confused by human compassion. Some actually requested to remain on Earth rather than return to Vorthak space. When the final prisoner exchange was negotiated, Zethkai volunteered to testify before the Galactic Council about human capabilities. The experience had changed him in ways that made return to normal Vorthak society impossible. He had seen what it meant to fight for principles rather than conquest, and the knowledge haunted him. Standing now before the assembled delegates, Zethkai prepared to deliver his final warning about the species that had defeated the mightiest military force in known space. Zethkai looked up at the hundreds of alien faces watching him from the curved galleries of the Galactic Council chamber. Representatives from 47 species had listened to his testimony in absolute silence, and now he could see the confusion and concern in their expressions. They had expected a routine report about another successful conquest. Instead, they had heard something that challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare and civilization. The Vorthak commander straightened his forearms and prepared to deliver the most important words of his life. In the viewing gallery, he could see the human delegation sitting quietly, their faces showing neither pride nor satisfaction. They had not come here to gloat about their victory. They had come to ensure that his message was heard and understood. Honored delegates, Zethkai began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I have told you how the humans defeated the mightiest military force in known space, but you must understand that their victory was not achieved through superior technology or greater numbers. They won because they fight differently than any species we have encountered. A murmur ran through the assembly as delegates leaned forward to catch every word. The crystalline representative from Altair Prime spoke first, her harmonic voice echoing strangely in the vast space. Commander Zethkai, are you suggesting that these humans possess some unknown weapon or defensive capability that our sensors have failed to detect? Zethkai's laugh was bitter and filled with hard-earned wisdom. The humans do possess a weapon, honored delegate, but it is not made of metal or energy. Their weapon is their willingness to sacrifice everything rather than accept defeat. They turn weakness into strength, disadvantage into opportunity, and desperation into determination. The Aquatic Federation delegate raised a tentacle arm to signal a question. Surely you exaggerate the capabilities of a single species. The Vorthak have conquered 17 star systems. How could one primitive world resist such proven military might? Because we never understood what we were fighting, Zethkai replied, his voice growing stronger with conviction. We thought we were conquering territory and resources. The humans were defending ideas that they consider more valuable than life itself. We expected them to surrender when faced with superior force. Instead, they turned their entire civilization into a weapon aimed at making conquest impossible. The debate that followed revealed the depth of galactic ignorance about human nature. Species after species questioned Zethkai's account, suggesting that he had been defeated by some trick or deception rather than genuine human capability. The hive mind representative dismissed humans as emotionally unstable individuals incapable of sustained resistance. Zethkai's patience finally snapped. You want proof? I will give you proof that every species in this chamber can verify with your own sensors. He activated a holographic display that showed recent intelligence data from the Sol system. The images revealed massive construction projects in Earth's orbital space, clearly visible to any civilization with basic telescope technology. The humans are building a fleet, Zethkai announced. Not for conquest, but for exploration and defense. Their technology has advanced 50 years in the 3 years since our invasion. They are reverse engineering our equipment and improving it. Within 1 generation, they will have faster-than-light travel, The chamber erupted in concerned voices as delegates recognized the implications. A species that could defeat the Vorthak military would soon have the ability to project power across interstellar distances. Several representatives called for immediate action to prevent human expansion into galactic space. "That would be the greatest mistake in galactic history," Zethkai said, his voice cutting through the babble of alien languages. "Any attempt to destroy humanity before they achieve spaceflight will result in exactly the kind of resistance that defeated my forces. The humans have proven that they can adapt to any threat and turn any attack into motivation for greater resistance." The mechanical collective delegate spoke with the cold logic of artificial intelligence. "Then you suggest we allow a potentially dangerous species to acquire the means for interstellar aggression?" Zethkai's response carried the weight of personal experience. "I suggest that you learn from my mistakes. The humans are not naturally aggressive. They only become dangerous when they are threatened. Every attack on their world has made them stronger and more determined. The correct approach is not warfare, but diplomacy." He activated another holographic display showing communication logs from Earth. The images revealed human attempts to establish peaceful contact with nearby star systems, broadcasting messages of friendship and scientific cooperation in dozens of alien languages. "The humans are trying to talk to us," Zethkai explained. "They have been sending diplomatic signals for months, offering to share their scientific discoveries and cultural knowledge. They want to join galactic civilization as partners, not conquerors." The ethereal Confederation representative spoke with barely contained alarm. "But surely their military capabilities make them a threat to galactic stability." "Only if we make them one," Zethkai replied. "I have studied human history during my captivity on their world. They have fought terrible wars among themselves, but they have also created periods of peace and cooperation that lasted for generations. They understand both conflict and harmony better than most species because they have experienced both extremes." The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this information. Several species had built their entire cultures around avoiding conflict, while others, like the Vorthak, had glorified conquest. The idea of a species that excelled at both war and peace was difficult for most galactic civilizations to comprehend. Dr. Lisa Park rose from the human delegation in the viewing gallery and requested permission to address the assembly. Her voice was calm and professional as she spoke to the assembled representatives. "Commander Zethkai has described our capabilities accurately, but I want to address your concerns about human intentions. We did not choose to become warriors. We became warriors because we were attacked. What we truly want is to explore the galaxy, learn from other civilizations, and contribute to the common good of all intelligent species." Her words carried the same quiet authority that had disturbed Vorthak soldiers during the invasion. She spoke of human dreams of peaceful exploration, scientific advancement, and cultural exchange. But underlying her diplomatic language was an unmistakable strength that reminded every delegate of the species that had defeated the Vorthak Empire. Captain Morrison stood beside Dr. Park and added his own perspective. "We defeated the Vorthak, not because we wanted to fight, but because we had no choice. Give us a choice, and we will choose cooperation over conflict every time. But never mistake our desire for peace as weakness. We will defend ourselves and our allies with everything we have." The final vote came after hours of debate. By a narrow margin, the Galactic Council approved immediate diplomatic contact with Earth. Zethkai was appointed as the primary liaison, his unique understanding of human psychology making him the logical choice, despite his role in the invasion. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, many approached Zethkai with questions about human capabilities and motivations. He found himself repeatedly emphasizing the same crucial points. Humans were not naturally aggressive. They responded to threats with adaptation rather than submission, and they valued principles more than life itself. The Philosophical Union. Delegate asked the question that would define future human-alien relations. Commander, what advice would you give to species that wish to establish peaceful relationships with humanity? Zethkai's answer would become known as the first protocol of human contact. Approach them with respect and honesty. Never threaten them or their values. Remember that they judge others by actions rather than words. Most importantly, understand that they will die before they surrender their freedom, but they will live peacefully with anyone who respects that freedom. As the great chamber emptied, Zethkai remained at the speaker's podium, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. 3 years ago, he had been a proud Vorthak warrior confident in his species' superiority. Now he was an exile from his own people, forever changed by his encounter with humanity. Dr. Park approached him as the last delegates departed. Thank you for your testimony, Commander. I know it wasn't easy for you to relive those memories. Zethkai looked at the human female who had saved his life and opened his mind to new possibilities. Dr. Park, I have one final question that has haunted me since my capture. Why did you treat wounded Vorthak soldiers with the same care you gave to your own people? Her smile was gentle, but filled with the same strength that had sustained human resistance throughout the invasion. Because that's who we are, Commander. We believe that every intelligent being has value, even our enemies. That's what we were, fighting to protect. As they walked together toward the council chamber's exit, Zethkai understood that his testimony was not just a warning about human military capabilities. It was an introduction to a species that would challenge every assumption about intelligence, morality, and the nature of civilization itself. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, Zethkai thought as he watched Dr. Park's confident stride, that was exactly what the galaxy needed.